Hello, everybody, and welcome to our talk, I Am Not a Robot, where we're going to explore how artificial intelligence can help us understand and explore our humanity. I'm Kate, I'm an art historian, and I'll be taking a look at AI-generated art a little bit later on in this talk. We've also got Sophie here, who will give us a little wave. Here's Sophie, who studies maths and statistics. And she'll be taking a more mathematical approach to this topic. Michael, who will give us a wave, is our psychologist in the group and will be giving us some detail about the ethics of AI. And finally, we have Zane, who will also give us a wave, who studies economics. She's given us a rundown of the role that AI can play in economics, which Sophie will be presenting because Zane is currently working tech magic in the background to make sure things run smoothly. So before we get started, we wanted to establish a bit of an understanding about what everyone here in the audience already knows about AI. So if you have a look in the chat box, we've dropped a form in there, and we'd like to fill that out. We'd like you to fill that out before we begin, if that's okay, just so that we can get a bit of an understanding of where everyone's at. Once you've filled that out, feel free to come back to the chat box and first of all say hi, because it's nice to see people here. And then also to let us know any words that you already have and associate with artificial intelligence. So I know that there are quite a few that came to mind when I started working on this project. So it will be interesting to see. So I know that there are quite... That was me talking. I don't know how I managed to do that. Apologies, everyone. Once everyone has had a go at filling in the form, if anyone is able to comment, let us know. If not, we will come back to that question at the end anyway, and we'll see if people's perceptions have maybe changed. I think this has probably been enough time, so I think we'll move on and just... Sophie is going to begin. Oh, wonderful. People are saying hi. Hi, everyone. I'm glad people are here. Hi. Yeah, if you start thinking about words you associate with AI, maybe think of some that you have now, and then maybe your perception of that will change throughout, and we'll come back to that question. Sci-fi and sinister. I do like that. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad people are commenting. Thanks, people. You also think of the film Her. Interesting. I see. So it's kind of this like very obviously sciencey, but also I'm getting definitely like horror, scary vibes from this. So we'll see if you'll be thinking that later on, if it's so scary, maybe later. Hello. Right. I think that's probably enough of that. Let's head on to Sophie and see if we can change these perceptions slightly.
Hello. Okay, so on to the introduction to this presentation. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what AI actually is. So artificial intelligence itself, AI, all about machines simulating human behaviours. There's also a sub-branch of this, machine learning, and this is just a step beyond AI. We're going to be seeing that machines can learn from themselves using the data you put in originally and actually create or come out with something quite different to what you originally programmed. And perhaps that's something people find a little bit more scary. So let's address the fear we all have, or that may keep you awake at night if it hasn't yet occurred to you. Will robots overthrow the human race? So that was a little bit dramatic. Let's reframe the question just a little bit. What does it mean to be human, and how do we differ from AI? Now, perhaps this fantastical idea of evil robots with emotions that look exactly like humans might not be quite right, but there's still a long way that we've come in what AI actually can do. Now, in this talk, I probably will be talking about some of my famous mathematicians at the beginning. I'm a big fan of Dr. Hannah Fry, and she's written this amazing book, yes, Naomi, a really good book, about AI called Hello World. She suggests changing the perspective towards a more collaborative idea where AI isn't de-skilling humans but actually enhancing us. So an example she looks at is driving, which is quite funny because this morning on campus I actually saw Warwick testing out one of its driverless cars. I think they call it the Swarm, kind of based on the idea of bees in a hive. And basically the idea is that they'll all be in one big connected network, and they can all look out for each other and see if things are going wrong. And that really points out something that I want to talk about here, because humans have some big weaknesses, especially in driving. We're not very good at focusing, paying attention to detail, being aware of our surroundings, and acting under pressure. And those are often the things that we would ask a human to do with a robot. So say you have a driverless car that you've created, you might have a human driving this car as a backup, a safety, but the very thing humans can't do is this safety network, acting under pressure if the machine goes wrong, or being aware of what might happen. So instead we might flip our understanding and instead look at what the machine can do to help us driving before we make the full transition. Next slide, please. And then on to my second favourite mathematician, Marcus de Sautoy, a professor at the University of Oxford. So this is a video we're going to show you in a second. We're going to try and tell the difference between some AI music and original Bach. Now, AI generated music is basically looking at a huge amount of data and spotting lots of different patterns and things, which is very much something that Bach does in his music anyway. He's a very mathematical composer, and patterns are very much his thing. So you can see how an AI might take that and create something very similar. Whether it's original or not is a question that we can think about a bit later. Let's have a listen.
So here's a little challenge for you. I'm going to have two pieces played. One of them is by Bach, but one of them is by a piece of artificial intelligence. But can you sniff out the difference? So was that the Bach, or is this the real thing? So you've heard them both? Which one do you think was artificial and which one was human?
Okay, so if people want to leave comments on whether they thought the first one or the second one was the real Bach, I'll just give a second to see if anything comes through. So we've got a vote for the second one. And yeah, another vote for the second. Okay, so obviously a lot of uncertainty, but I think a general consensus that the first one was AI and the second one was Bach, which is correct. I think it's interesting because, of course, this uncertainty is showing that the AI was really very good at trying to replicate Bach's music. But equally, to the human ear, there is almost an emotion or a feeling that one of them is more right than the other, and perhaps that shows that there's still a lot of merit to human music. I'm going to pass over now to Kate to talk about some art.
Yes, so we're kind of just touching there with music about whether AI can be original, but if we go to the next slide, we're going to start looking at the visual arts. And actually, interestingly, Sautoy commented not long ago when we were talking at the start about AI having no feelings or emotions. And that's something I'm going to touch on as we look at art, because the ability to create art is really something that many of us consider to be a key element of the human experience. There's a researcher, Harsha Gangdahabalta, who even claims that creativity is a quintessential human endeavour, and surely a certain level of kind of consciousness is required for us to render the world around us, or the world inside our heads, into an artwork that others can view and potentially relate to. After all, we don't really see animals painting or sculpting for the pure pleasure of it. The Cambridge English Dictionary actually defines art as the making of objects, images, music, etc. that are beautiful or express feelings, something that we obviously don't associate with AI. Now, as an art historian, I do have my own issues with that definition of art, but it does provide us with one kind of fundamental element that is required for art, and that is emotion. AI does not currently possess this emotion, yet they are starting to create art. So just to touch on how this AI-generated artwork is created, machine learning models are used to create algorithms, basically. And based on what is inputted into an algorithm, the artificial intelligence will produce its own image based on the trends it sees. So these two examples on the screen, for example, we've got a Picasso, and then we've got an AI-produced artwork. And it's likely that lots of Picasso's works and Cubist works were probably fed into this machine learning system, and the AI created an algorithm that generated the work on the left. And you can give this whole process a go yourself. If you Google AI art, the first few links are going to be to websites where you can do this for yourself. Most of these systems work in exactly the same way. So you would type in like a few prompt words. I did it and I put in princess and the P. And the algorithm will use what it's been taught to influence the content of its own work. So clearly, AI artwork is very much dependent on images that already exist and someone creating an initial system or algorithm, which we will come back to. Just to mention a study done by the researcher I mentioned, Gangdahabalta, he asked a group of individuals to identify AI-generated artwork hidden amongst a collection of human works, and only one of the 5 AI-generated artworks was identified as AI. The others were misidentified as being human artworks. So although they might not feel emotion, the art created by AI does look just the same as human art. And on that point, if we go to the slide that you just got a sneak peek of, this painting here was created by AI in 2018 and was valued by Christie's originally at $10,000 US. It then went on to sell for $432,500 US, which is a phenomenal amount. As you can see, it depicts a man, and the image is incomplete. There are large areas of empty canvas, and the figure's even missing a nose. And this was created using one of these machine learning systems that I mentioned. It actually was called a generative adversarial network specifically, and was created by a company called Obvious Art. And they created an algorithm by inputting thousands of pre-20th century portraits. And the artificial intelligence took all of these to create this. And it's the incomplete nature of this work that actually seems to have garnered so much attention. This was unintentional. This is actually a result of the AI not working correctly. It was meant to create a realistic portrait, but instead it's left looking unfinished or perhaps slightly abstracted. And this kind of adds a little bit of a human element almost weirdly, because it adds that human imperfection. And if AI can create an artwork like this, and then it can be sold for such a phenomenal sum, it does make us question that art is perhaps no longer a fundamental feature of humanity. Despite all of this, I think there is still a key difference, and that is that AI art is completely reliant on humans. Existing human images have still been fed into this system, and no AI wakes up in the morning and thinks, I'm going to paint a painting today. It's been told to do so by a human, even with machine learning. I think at the moment, AI art is still limited because it's an extension of human creation, and there's still an artistic group that had to create this work. Obvious Art created this technically. I think when AI can create completely new works, completely of their own accord, with no reference points, that's when it might begin to surpass us. But for now, art seems to be one of the areas where humans have somewhat of an advantage. We're going to go to Michael now, though, to have a look at kind of the ethics of all of this.
Yes. Hello, guys. So, as we've seen so far, artificial intelligence can be cool. It has helped it's been helpful in different areas of the world, in different industries, as Kate said, with art and music, as Sophie said. And I think it's very, very, very positive for society in when you're considering how sustainable it can be, how efficient and effective it can make things. But I wanted to do some research to see how ethical artificial intelligence can actually be. So if you move to the next slide, you could see that I have chosen to highlight two important issues that I believe have and could become even worse developed due to the popularity and adoption of artificial intelligence. So first up, I wanted to look at unemployment. So I did some research, and in 2019, I think research showed that one of the leading causes of unemployment in the UK was automation. So as society invents new ways to automate jobs, we create issues for people who are hoping to find work in these selected sectors. So for instance, if you consider the retail industry, I'm sure many of you have gone to some sort of store or shop that have included the use of self-checkouts. So self-checkouts, has been introduced and has been praised for being more efficient and more time effective for both the customers and the employees, which is an upside, is a great, is positive, yay, yay, yay. However, one of the major downsides into self-checkouts is that it has led to a huge reduction in jobs available that were once in really high demand. And retail jobs actually aren't the only ones that potentially can be in trouble. I did some more research and found a list of jobs online that reportedly won't exist in the next 20 years due to AI. And if you move to the next slide, you will see just a few of them. So travel agent jobs is a main one. Gone were the days where people used to visit travel agencies and ask for their ideal holidays, their dream holidays. Now people can go on a random website and use a chat box or an AI bot to find their dream destination. So it apparently in 20 years, travel agencies may not be in existence anymore, which is kind of scary. Newspaper and newspaper delivery jobs. So most people read their news online now or watch the news on TV or simply use artificial intelligence by saying things like, Alexa, tell me the news of today, or hey Siri, what is the news of today? They are, sorry, Siri. Sorry, my Siri's talking to me. And it could tell you, about the news of the day, which is a lot more easier for some people. Train driver jobs can be out of existence in the next 20 years. I'm not sure if you people have seen some self-driving trains, but there are some in London. I've been on one, really cool. I don't know if I was scared or not, but it's just different. I think it's gonna be something different in the future. And finally, pharmacist jobs, which again was something that really, really surprised me because pharmacists train many, many years to become pharmacists. And around the world, in some places, robot pharmacists have already been put out in full swing. In some parts of the world, they're faster, they're more efficient. They can work 24 hours. And it's just, I think it's interesting. I think it's very interesting. And the next couple of years will be a very interesting society. If we move to the next slide, the second main issue that I found where in regards to artificial intelligence was how it affects humanity and how it will and possibly could affect the way we humans interact with one another. So artificial intelligent bots have become like a lot more I guess better at modeling human conversations and relationships. Again, I did some more research and saw that Cambridge University in 2015 created a study in which asked people to send text messages to someone else. So the difference in this study was that they would either be speaking to a human or a robot, and they had to decide who they were actually having a conversation with. So the results of that study showed that the robot was able to fool more than half of the human raters into thinking that they were speaking to another human being. And at first I was like, okay, this is really cool. Like, this is a cool finding. This is like, something different and interesting. But I think when I thought about it in more depth, it really highlighted the strength of AI and how far we've come and possibly how far we could go in the next couple of years. And we now, as humans, interact with machines kind of on a daily, whether it's again at self-checkouts or during sales online, if you want to talk to like a bot or something like that. We speak to bots and AI machines quite a lot. And I think it's important to acknowledge that even though as humans we are limited in attention and emotion, as Sophie and Kate said, and well, even though artificial bots can virtually challenge any resource in terms of emotion and attention. They're kind of like unlimited. With that, we should take these understandings and not be scared, but utilize the power of AI in order to make the future of society more just better, I guess. I think we could use our AI and how far we've come to help further society in a positive way. So that was a psychological element. Next up, we're going to hear more from Sophie about the economic side of.
Hello. So I'm going to be doing some research that was done by Zane, but I will present it now. We're going to look at whether AI will be redefining economics, and there's some really interesting stuff here. So to start off with, we want to understand how AI and machine learning are changing economics, and the most essential thing to look at is setting the right priorities, addressing existing issues that economics perhaps couldn't cover itself, and that prevents economics from being a true science. So we often consider economics to be a social discipline, not a natural science, because economics stick to theoretical models and have this big assumption that all humans are rational. These models don't really provide much value in the real world because they don't take into account the impact of unpredictable and inevitably irrational human behaviours on the economy. Humans are irrational and they have biases and misconceptions and make decisions based on flawed knowledge. The issue is that economists base models around this theory that people have rational expectations, and this simply isn't the case. A branch of economics, which economists refer to as behavioural economics, already recognises that the standard economic theory is based on these false assumptions and that there's a lot of psychology involved in people's decision-making processes. However, so far, it's been unable to actually use data and science to better perceive the world, and perhaps this is where AI can come in. The use of AI could change this for the better. It accurately remodels human behaviour to make better predictions and estimates of real-world impacts, bringing economics closer to being the true science that can more easily identify financial bubbles and potential weak areas of the economy. Economics cannot be considered a natural science because scientists try to have an unbiased attitude that allows them to analyse the real world in the most accurate way. And in theory, social sciences will also aim to do this. However, political interference is quite a big issue in economics because economists can distort information in order to advocate for their own party's platform. AI might be able to change this by removing biases and giving impartial and objective data-driven and evidence-based suggestions that can put an end to politically charged economic debates and provide us with unbiased suggestions on how to overcome economic challenges. We actually see AI algorithms used already in the real world. It's been used to analyse how media headlines influence opinions about the economy. So JP Morgan has got an algorithm already that has tracked how Donald Trump's tweets used to affect the financial market until his Twitter was ended, and aims to explain and measure how his tweets impacted volatility in US interest rates. It found very strong evidence that tweets were actually immediately affecting the market rates. And central banks can also be more effective and quicker to put plans into place by knowing when a recession is going to hit. So, for example, the 2008 depression could have been potentially avoided or at least mitigated by predicting changes in supply and demand. We can put necessary changes in place and avoid these major economic disasters. So AI can have a really big role in keeping us safe, essentially. So I think I'm going to pass on now to Kate.
So just wanted to come back quickly to this question of, will robots overthrow the human race? Which, as we said at the start, is a tad dramatic and probably not really the point or what to worry about. Because as we've said, AI can be incredibly helpful and it can fill in some gaps where humans are prone to, well, human error. We've mentioned self-driving cars, this economic forecasting, which I can't fully get my head around, but it seems that it can be super, helpful. These are some major positives of AI. We have also mentioned, some of the issues like unemployment. But But I think what's most important to remember is that AI only exists because we as humans created it for our purpose. Machine learning does mean that AI's knowledge and skills can kind of grow beyond what its programmers do know. But this only happens when we want it to do this. For now, it seems that collaboration with AI and using it to our benefit, to better society, seems to be the way to go. And overall, it's important to remember that humans still retain key elements of humanity that AI cannot replicate. We still possess emotion, and as we discovered today, the ability to create art and music completely from scratch, and the fact that people in the comments noticed that which one was AI generated means how good this music is also in question. And perhaps most importantly, we still have to check that annoying little box to tell websites that I am not a robot every time we try and buy something. So before we open up to the floor for questions, I just want people to let me know again any other words that might have come up during this process. There's been a nice discussion going on. That's been really nice to see. But any other words that now maybe come to mind? Obviously, this is a massive topic. There's so much to say. But it would be interesting to see if the small amount that we've looked at it has kind of impacted anyone. I think there's some interesting comments to be said about, bots as a chat function are currently very frustrating. Maybe whilst people are thinking of words, we're all going to come onto the screen ready for questions. Intrigued, exactly. Hopefully we've given you a taste of things that could happen and of maybe things that you can look into yourself. We're going to have some resources up at the end as well, which will be useful if you want to do any further reading. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions, now is also the time to start firing them right at us. Whilst you're thinking of them, we will also pop another little form quickly into the chat if people don't mind filling that out as well, just to let us know potentially if you've learned anything today, etc. But do let us know if you have any questions. I think it's interesting. One of us on the team was writing, obviously, from the Warwick Institute account, and we were talking about the decisions for humanity, and I guess how we are going to use this for ourselves is potentially quite interesting. But feel free to question us. We have time.
We do. While we're waiting, can I say the funniest fact I've got from this was the painting, the $400K painting. I think that's crazy.
I know.
Oh my gosh, no comments.
Yeah, so many questions. Okay. Okay, I see one about art and music. Oh my gosh. Okay, I see one about art and music that could be maybe for you and me, Sophie. How long do you think it will be before AI can create art and music that is indistinguishable from human art? Ooh, have you got any initial thoughts on a musical perspective, Sophie?
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the comment underneath as well about the music example and AI kind of copying previous music and adapting it. I mean, firstly, there's the element of machine learning that means that what we put into something might not necessarily be what we end up getting out again. And that's definitely interesting in the idea of whether things can become original and whether that originality can make something more human. And also, as you say, a lot of popular music, and to some extent perhaps it has something to do with the selling value of popular art as well, is just based on what's worked before. People see that perhaps pop music is the most common category and people like a certain look to a band or a certain style of music. You know, that's rehashed again and again, and lawsuits about this that are very much up in the air. I think it's a very human thing to perhaps see AI rehashing things that have already been done, though you can't really take an AI to court just yet.
I'm sure that'll happen at some point. I think it's interesting because from an art historical point of view, I think this is probably every point in time is a very interesting point in time for art history, in my opinion. But this in particular, it'll be interesting to see the repercussions moving forward. And I don't think it will ever anytime soon become indistinguishable from human art, but that might just be me, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because I think it probably has its own merits and it's potentially will grow into its own medium and area of art history. And again, I guess because as we're talking about all of this linking about the idea of, you know, copying music and art and adapting, and that's kind of the point of art. I mean, that is a whole dissertation that you could talk about originality in music and art, couldn't you? And in all sorts of forms of art, because most people build on what's gone before. So in a way, I guess that does make the AI more similar to us than we would maybe like to think, because yeah, isn't that what all creatives potentially do? I still think it comes back to the fact that an AI isn't going to choose to do that unless it's programmed to do so yet.
And not to do down creators, of course.
Yeah.
I think the most popular things do tend to be this rehashing of previous, but there are also a lot of very good original and creative artists out there. Perhaps they'll be the future of human art.
So I think another interesting one from Michael, our ethics pro over here. If an AI-controlled car causes an accident, who is at fault?
Yikes.
I know. Big question for you tonight on a Monday evening.
I don't know. I think that's an interesting question. Do you know what? I'm trying to think of it as if, like, if you were in a self-checkout and it kind of like malfunctioned or something, who would be at fault? Like the store and the manufacturers, I guess. So wouldn't that be the same as like a car? I don't know. I'm not too sure. That's the thing. You said something right. You can't really take AI to court. But I don't know who you can take. Maybe the people who created it, or I don't know. I think that's really interesting.
This is something that really interests me about AI, because it is such a it's in development. It's being developed. And because it's building on itself so much and progressing so quickly, there are these really big questions that we have about it that we can't answer very easily right now. And I think a lot of early, perhaps, court cases involving the software designers, the engineers behind AI, and companies, they're going to be groundbreaking, and it's quite exciting.
I think we've probably got time for one more question. So potentially one that we can all think about from all our different disciplines is Ben's question, that just as smartphones have revolutionized our daily life, what branch of AI do we think will have the biggest kind of day-to-day impact? Interesting. We could probably all come at this from very different angles, because even though there's probably a lot of more realistic ones thinking about art and the fact that art and visual images are used so much in like advertising these days, and you know, we are so like picture oriented, I think if that starts to be infiltrated by AI created images, and then I mean, I don't know what impact it will have, but I think that would have a big impact if the market is being saturated by those sorts of images, because pictures are everywhere. But maybe that's probably not the most day-to-day, but in my head it is, because I'm arty and I look at art all the time. What about you?
I do think day-to-day would be if AI cars do like go into full swing. I do think that'll be the biggest day-to-day impact to probably all of our lives. And I can't imagine a world like that. Like being able to just get up, still be like half asleep, drink your coffee and say, take me to work, and just wake up at work. Like, I just think that's so fascinating. I think that would be the biggest like impact on a day-to-day for all of us, for me personally.
Yeah. I think also AI that looks at the data that we're putting into it, our personal data, and starts to work out things about us and ways that it can improve to impress us and to please us, which is ultimately what we want it to do. We give it a task that we're aiming for, and what it does with that is where the interesting stuff comes from. And if we're putting in people's personal data, obviously there's a lot to do with data protection going on at the moment anyway. That could have some really big impacts on our daily lives, I think, even if it's not necessarily obvious when you walk out your front door.
I think with a lot of these questions and everything to do with AI, it's just kind of I have to wait and see what happens kind of a deal, isn't it?
Very much.
I think that's all we've got time for. We hope this has been interesting for people, something to do for half an hour on a Monday evening. Thank you everyone for coming to watch though. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Drop us a
Please do
goodbye.
our evaluation form.
Yes, please.
It's in the comments. Yes, have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.